We are still talking about Alice Springs. It is 14 months since I first spoke to Darren Clark, who's a business owner there, that talked about the violence that was back then unsustainable. Now we've seen that violence descend into riots and the Territory government has been forced to act. What has been imposed is a 14-day youth curfew. But what are the long-term solutions? Joining me live now is the Shadow Minister for Child Protection and Prevention of Family Violence, Kerrynne Liddle. Kerrynne, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
What are those long-term solutions? They're not easy, but something needs to be done.
Well, we've certainly seen big announcements on Central Australia and a lot of money put towards efforts to reduce crime, reduce antisocial behaviour and increase the safety of all Central Australians. But what we've seen is some pretty poor delivery and some poor outcomes. Yeah. I've been asking for some time for information on how decisions were made about how all of that additional money was going to be used and who it was going to, but also information on what has been the outcomes to date, some progress. Some of that money was given to organisations that have not reported publicly on their progress on their programs for many years. And I want to know what assessment was done that money was going to programs that it should be going to, rather than just to the people who allowed us about getting some money.
Right, so there's no public reporting of how this money is spent, so we don't know whether it's working. We don't know whether these organisations that have these millions of dollars actually have the personnel to do what they say they need to do.
Well, I'm not sure how they can say it is working. The figures tell us very differently, although you even have to look at what's happening with crime statistics across the Northern Territory. The latest data we have is from December. We are now almost in April. So, it's hard to know really what is going on except for the everyday experiences of the people that live there. What we saw, that appalling incident that we saw, is one of a lot of incidents that are occurring. That was on a much bigger scale. When I was watching those images, I was concerned not just for the safety of those individuals who were doing the damage and for the people inside, but what about the poor innocent people that just go about their lives in a cost of living crisis? Yep. They are impacted significantly as well. The other thing that really concerns me is this is criminal behaviour. This is not the behaviour of people in Alice Springs, including Aboriginal people, that just go about their lives, not causing any problems for anyone, just trying to get through this cost of living crisis, where, this is actually dishonouring them because they are not causing the problem. We need to focus on those individuals that are causing this problem, and to suggest that this is all about youth is quite incorrect. There were adults in that vision. There were people who you would think are there because they're supervising younger children. The issue that underpins many of these things is domestic and family violence, whether people are victims or they are fleeing their homes because of domestic and family violence and they do not want to be exposed to it. So whatever happens in the field of delivering services for people who are impacted by domestic and family violence, it has to be by services that have some clinical basis for their work, that have skilled and qualified people, that are peer-reviewed, and the pedagogy that informs some of the behaviour change is actually accepted by the industry as being an appropriate model.
What do you mean by that? Are you saying that there are lower standards, the tyranny of low expectations here for Aboriginal families in Alice Springs when it comes to domestic violence, because this is generational, multi-generational?
Well, it's not multi-generational. It is multi-generational in some families, not all families. We have to be clear about this. It is not every single Aboriginal family that is impacted always by domestic and family violence. There are people who are going about their lives quite healthy, quite contributing members of the community, and they are affected by this bad behaviour. There needs to be a focus on those people, including services, including a police response to those people that actually think this is acceptable behaviour. When you keep shifting the goalposts and you keep making excuses for this bad behaviour, you are going to get the goalposts moving all the time and people just behaving more and more in the way that's unacceptable. Where's the punishment that's being meted out?
I think
Where's the services that respond to this?
Yeah, I think what we've seen as well, sorry to interrupt you there, that we've seen that there's no fear of police, of authority. And there are cohorts within Indigenous communities that seem to operate with their own rules, their own systems. Is that fair enough in some circumstances, or is it an example of why it's got so out of control in some areas? Look, I'm conscious, and you pulled me up on it, and I'm happy that you did. I don't want to pretend like Aboriginal people in Alice Springs and the Northern Territory are one homogenous group. This is not everyone, but there is an overrepresentation, I would say, in some Indigenous communities.
Well, I was born and raised in Alice Springs in Central Australia, and I still have many, many members of my family there. This behaviour is appalling, and it needs to be tackled by the organisations that are funded to support people. So I asked the question when I looked at that vision, where are the services that were gifted to do their work, the hundreds of millions of dollars that went into Central Australia? Where was the intelligence that told them that there were issues brewing in those town camps? Where was the people who are supposed to be running buses to get people home? Where are the youth services that were supposed to be keeping an eye on these kids? It just seems that the intelligence that informed what was brewing here was absent. And I think the Minister and the Prime Minister have questions to answer here. You can fly from when they made that big announcement about housing, and I did hear a conversation earlier about housing. You can build as many houses as you like, but if you don't create a safe environment for people to be in that house, then children and adults and women and elders will not stay in that house. This is not something that's somehow specific to Aboriginal people. That's for everyone. Yeah. You can't build a house and expect people to live in it if it's not a safe place to be. And that's why we have to make sure that programs, if you look at all the four indicators that are going backwards in Close the Gap, I believe all of those indicators relate directly to family and domestic violence contributing factors.
Kerrynne, it's extraordinary that you have to spell out the absolute obvious here, but it is a reminder that perhaps our political leaders need. Thank you so much for your time. We hope to speak to you again soon.